Real quick before we start, this video turned out great, but I wanted to let you know this is another podcast style video. I'll have some replays going on, but feel free to throw this on in the car or whatever, at least until the back half of the video where we get into a replay review. Let's begin. Hey everybody, Grace here. Welcome to another video. Listen, this is going to be a good one. I'm telling y'all right now, so make sure to stick around for the whole thing. This is a new series I'm starting called Mastering the Mirror, where we're going to look at some of the GOAT format's most popular decks, Chaos Turbo, Warrior, Control, and I'm bringing on some experts with these respective decks. I'm going to pick their brains a little bit, ask some questions, and hopefully we can increase our skill in the mirror match, at least somewhat. So the mirror match in Yu-Gi-Oh! And card games, it's an interesting thing. Everybody feels a little bit differently about it. It's one of the kind of, some people love it, some people hate it, some people live for it. For me, it's like an ego thing. I just hate losing the mirror match. I hate losing to somebody that's running the same deck as me. But anyway, and today joining me is none other than one of the best Warrior players in GOAT format, 3v3 champion, 5-time PWCQ champion, and a 2-time major champion, Moxies. Moxies, thanks for taking the time, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, hello. Yeah, no, this is great. I love doing these types of things. Super happy to be in the show. I've watched most of the videos on this channel, and they've been really high quality.
Oh, thanks, Moxies. So I did not prepare you for this first question that I'm going to ask you, because I want the answer right off the top of your head.
Oh.
So what you can think of, the top 3 Warrior duelists, not a ranking or anything, but give me just 3 names of players that you do not want to face in the Warrior mirror.
Well, number 1 is going to be Jonathan LaBounty, my longtime teammate. Arguably, if not, it's pretty definitive best Warrior player in the game. One of the greatest minds. So he's going to be the highest on my list. Then second, I'm going to have to put one of my longtime friends and arguably the best player in Go format over its history, which is Lucas, the Heretic.
Definitely, yep.
Then for third, I'm just going to give it to my past teammate who has some of the most wins on the deck and some of the best innovations in the deck's history, which would be STL Killer.
Of course, yeah. Those are the top 3 that popped into my mind right off the bat. I think, I think you nailed it right there. So let me ask you, I know you've probably played hundreds and hundreds of Warrior mirrors over, the course of your GOAT format career. Do you like the Warrior mirror?
I'd say post game 1, I like it a lot. The Warrior mirrors, because they're basically built to be anti Chaos Turbo. Game 1s are kind of wild, but post that, there's a lot of fun and a lot of thinking post board.
Yeah, and that really leads into my next question. That's a good point, because we're talking Go format. There's sack. So basically, based off of what you said, you do believe that there is some skill involved in the Warrior mirror, at least to a certain extent.
Yes, there is. I would say that a bunch of the skill comes from deck building, side decking, game plans of how you want to play the mirror versus your opponent, what you think they're going to be doing, and how you're going to combat that. I think a lot of those factors are very, very important in the mirror. But yeah, there's a lot of skill in the Warrior mirror.
That's a great point, and I like that you mentioned the game 1 thing. So for some of you people that might be newer to GOAT format or newer to playing Warriors in the Warrior mirror match, typically in GOAT format, Warrior decks are built to counter Chaos Turbo, like Moxies mentioned. So really, game 1 in the Warrior mirror a lot of times will just boil down to who doesn't draw the Nox and the Mystic Swordsman level 2s and the Dust Shoots at the wrong time. Where if one Warrior player draws the battle traps and the Rotas and the Solemns, they'll probably win. But then games 2 really kind of evens the field, and that's where the skill expression lies. So what is kind of unique about the Warrior mirror as opposed to any other matchup, if anything?
The format is like pretty heavily Chaos Turbo or Chaos, Turbo variants of sorts. So I would say that aggro mirrors are a lot less common right now. You don't really see too much of aggro on aggro. So what's unique about them is how you're going to decide which monsters you want to summon at which time, how you want to play your monsters, how you want to play your defensive cards against those monsters, how to get as much value from every single interaction, because a lot of aggro mirrors are pretty linear in the sense that it's going to be one for one trading cards. So how can you get all those trades to be favorable to you over the length of the game.
So obviously every match of Yu-Gi-Oh is, kind of unique in its own way. It's, one of the reasons I love the game, but, is there some sort of template for how the mirror typically goes? What's kind of the win con for in the Warrior mirror essentially?
Going to be summon and attack, and then it's going to be how to protect your monsters, how to not die from them attacking you. That's
Mm.
like majority of games are going to come down to sticking a monster and putting damage through with that monster. Now there are other factors to that because side decking introduces a lot of different things to that, but at its base level, the warrior mirror is protecting and attacking
Hmm.
with monsters.
Good. Yeah. So let's get into some of the kind of strategy of the warrior mirror itself. Obviously in goat format, one of the things that really makes a big difference for any match is who wins the die roll or the rock paper scissors. So how big of a difference does going first make in the mirror? And do you adjust your game plan differently, either going first or second?
Going first is, I mean, it's big in every single GOAT format match because of 6 cards, but in the Warrior Mirror, it's extremely important because it gives you a one-turn advantage where you can use some of these cards. Example being Trap Dust Shoot, where you will get value off of it, and there isn't nothing they can do about it. Versus going second, not only are you fighting against back row, having more monsters in your deck that are not going to be helpful to you, but you're also stuck with all these cards that aren't going to do anything against someone who set a bunch of cards in front of you. So, you open a hand that against Chaos Turbo, it looks incredible. You got a Mystic Swordsman, Blade Knight, Trap Dust Shoot, Knock, and then next thing you know, they Trap Dust Shoot you, take away your Blade Knight, and now you're stuck with your own shoot,
Hmm.
Knock, Mystic Swordsman, and the game can kind of fall apart pretty quickly. So, game one, it's pretty important to be able to stick those cards, or at least stick your summons and stick your back row first.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention. Even just getting that first summon on board without any resistance is always super helpful. That's a good point. Yeah, going first in the Warrior Mirror, very, very important. So, like I said, you've probably played a lot of Warrior Mirrors. What are some kind of typical mistakes you'll see less experienced Warrior players make that you can exploit sometimes?
Summoning is a huge thing I see a lot of people do, which is either summoning the incorrect monster, taking away the incorrect monster from your opponent, not trying to get value out of all of your monsters, especially the 1800s, because they're going to be in most games. The 1800s are going to be the weakest monster you have. So trying to get as much value from them as possible, I see mistakes. And then the number one mistake I see, and this isn't just the Warrior Mirror, it's just in general, but a lot of people summoning a 1600 Blade Knight, setting their entire hand, and then attacking with it to make it 200, like 2000.
Hmm.
Now, unless you're specifically doing that to get over an 1800 monster, that's different. But a lot of times, if you're attacking into a set or whatever, um, it's just unnecessary information to give to your opponent because what ends up happening is you set your entire hand to buff your 1600 Blade Knight to a 2000, and then you attack. Now, your opponent has the information that you don't have any more cards in your hand. You don't have another monster. Sure, you could have, a Revival, Call, or Prima, but you don't have any actual like dense monsters in your hand.
Hmm.
So now they get the thought of I could just sack you this monster, and now I have free reign to just attack on their field or just start pushing. Right, I'm not worried about a monster coming down after that. And I think that's pretty important. It's just unnecessary to give your opponent information about that. You want to force them to decide what they want to do against a 1600 Blade Knight.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I've never really even thought about that. I see that plenty. Yeah, giving that extra information. Sometimes that 400 damage just isn't quite worth
No,
it.
it's very very negligible amount of damage.
That's a good point. Information is huge in the mirror. I'll also add, I think sometimes newer players in the Warrior Mirror will be pretty quick to rip battle traps. Like Moxies mentioned, those 1800 beaters like Kaiku and even lower like used up Blade Knights and Tribe. Those are sometimes in the Warrior Mirror, if you summon one of those and attack, like, or your opponent summons one of those and attacks you, the kind of instant reaction is to Sakuretsu it, but you don't always necessarily have to. You can always get value out of your Blade Knights. You can always hold the battle traps for a better day, and it's about making those efficient trades. Another thing I'll mention real quick, and feel free to hop in, Moxies, if you have something to add. But I feel like sometimes kind of newer players to the Warrior Mirror will not always take into consideration their opponent's solemns. A lot of the time we're playing against Chaos Turbo. Sometimes Turbo plays solemn, but there's a lot of interesting things that go in when there's multiple solemns on the field at the same time, and I feel like people don't consider that a lot, because next thing you know, you just lost half your life. Your opponent solemns you back, and then you die to a ring on the next turn. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. To add on to that, trying to figure out one solemn, I think most people can kind of get around. It's what happens if there's two? What happens if there's three?
Mm,
And then then a lot of people lose where they go, I need this advantage. I'm gonna pot of greed. If they solemn, I'm gonna solemn. I'm okay with that. What if they solemn that back? And then what position does that put you in? What if you have two psalms? Are you going to use two psalms to put a trap or put a pot through, or put a monster attack through, or whatever it is you want to double psalm just to lose to a ring right after, right? So
yeah, that's really good. So, what do you think? I mean, we kind of went through a little bit of this, but what do you think separates good, from great duelists in the mirror?
strategy and value from trades. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was saying or alluding to earlier, you want to get every card in your hand. You want to get value from you, because a lot of the Warrior Mirror is just going to be trading one for one cards. You want to make sure that those trades are in your favor, right? Like you want to, for most of the times, you want your 1800 to get Saku'd for the most part. You want maybe to set a delinquent duo when they have no cards in hand, and force them to try and dust tornado it, something like that. You want to try and get value from your cards, and then on top of that, now some of this next part is going to be a bit more for online, because you can't do this so much as in real life gaming, but knowing your opponent. So a lot of the times you play online, you know your opponents. You've played against them before. You've seen them play. A lot of these duelists have certain tendencies of that they follow. Like they like to use spy in their side deck. They like to use connect soldier, blah blah blah, Mobius,
Mm,
stuff like that, right? So knowing your opponent and what they like to side deck will help. In understanding that helps you decide how you want to play against that and what cards are more likely for them to have.
yeah. What do you think kind of mind games are involved in the mirror match, specifically, games 2 and 3, especially?
I'd say there's two really important factors right now for mind games, and number one would be Zing. That card gets played by majority of Warrior players, and it turns itself into, is, do you want to set just one card to protect yourself against Zing? Are you going to set two, thinking that they could have it, couldn't have it? Are you going to side it versus them so they see it and then not side it? Are you going to not side it at all, but they've seen it in past games before, so now they're worried about it? Because the thing about Zing is it can cripple you if it resolves, and there's nothing you can do against it. So you want to be able to pay attention to that card. And then number two would be, are they a Mobius spy side decker? If they are, because then you have to be prepared to use resources on flips or on set cards. Are you going to just exile out of nowhere to hit a card because you don't have any recourse if they flip spy, then either have walls or they summon Mobius and it crushes you? Are you willing to take that chance? Use a Rhoda, use an exile force on the set. Um, and then on top of that, if you can't stop the flip, do you have the right back row to mitigate a summon of a Mobius? So do you have a battle trap in your hand? Are you going to not set it and maybe set Dust Tornado instead, and hoping you can get trades with the Mobius? So things like that, you gotta try and bait your opponent into summoning a Mobius, or if you are the person with the Mobius, are you going to summon a Mobius when there's a chance that you're gonna get no value? So cards like that are pretty important. And then the most common one that most people know of is paying attention to a pro set Heavy Storm, because
Mm,
in the mirror people do that all the time. They'll set Heavy Storm in like Solemn Judgment, or set Heavy Storm and a Sakuchi armor, block the first attack, and then flip the storm on their next turn. People will always try and get a Heavy Storm off because it can just get a free win in some games.
that's really good. I also feel like, sometimes with how are you getting your opponent to use dust tornadoes? Dust tornado is a common card in the warrior main deck, and so sometimes early, if you have those knocks or those duos that are dead, like you mentioned earlier, if you can set up in the right situation where you anticipate that your opponent is going to dust tornado your set in the end phase, you can get them to dust your dead knock. And like Moxie's mentioned, that's getting value out of cards that typically don't have any value in the mirror. And so, yeah, there's definitely a lot of mind games that go along with that as well. So I know you had success both, of course, online and in person. I know you recently got second place at a GGP not too long ago playing Warriors. Is there anything specific to playing in person, reads or something like that that could come up in the Warrior mirror?
Honestly, there's not too much that I can think of that translates from online to in person. There are a couple things, which would be if you're playing three shoots in your deck, you got to know if the place that you're playing at allows note taking or not, because if it does, no problem. You're just going to write down their hand. If it doesn't, then you have to be prepared. Are you capable of, seeing five, six cards in their hand? Um, Remembering all the cards while also paying attention to the actual game state and not, making mistakes because you're focusing so hard on what cards they have. Sometimes you can end up making mistakes in other aspects of the game. So are you prepared for that? Um, Things like, paying attention to how many cards they have in hand. Are they setting certain cards? Do you notice that like they like to set certain cards in certain positions? Because online most of the time once you click a card, it goes to wherever or it goes to like the first spot that you can set.
Yeah.
But are these types of duelists like to put things in certain spots and stuff like that? I wouldn't say there's too much to really think about the mirror specifically. I know for in general, if you go to these GGPs, unlike like bigger events where they have clocks everywhere, they don't. Most of the times, these local GGP level events, they just have one clock in the middle of the room. So when you go to your table, this is a piece of advice: always sit on the side of the table that lets you see the clock, because most of the time in these smaller events like this, one side you won't be able to see the clock, and the other side you will be able to see the clock. So take that into consideration when you sit down. Like when I went to the GGP, I sat in basically the same spot because I got majority of the time I was on the stream, and I sat as many times as I could in the spot against the wall. One, because then I don't have other people behind me looking at my cards. Not that I think anyone would do anything specifically, but just in
Yeah.
general, I don't want people staring at all the cards in my hand. And two, I could see the clock, and my opponent couldn't see the clock because we were so far to the other side of the room. So, and that gives you an advantage for time. Not that you should be doing that with time, but it's good to be aware of time.
Yeah, and just knowing that your opponent's not when you are can make a big difference. Damn, that's really good. That's next level. I've never ever considered that. Interesting. So I know there's a ton of options that you can side in the Warrior Mirror. There's a ton of choices. You can pick monsters, spells, traps. There's monsters like Spy, Reaper, Zombira. You can play plenty of spell options. Smashing Ground is a common one we see. We've seen the Bounty play that, as well as the Trunade is another option. And of course, trap choices like Zing. We've seen Bottomless start to emerge a bit recently, and of course, extra battle traps. So there's hundreds of options to side into the Warrior Mirror. How do you Moxies decide what you like to side in?
Usually meta dependent on how the other opponents that are on Warriors, what they're liking to do. Can I get multi value? Can I get a card that's good for the Warrior Mirror and it's also good for whatever else matchup you're playing
Mm.
against? So at the moment, I'm pretty high on Zombira. I usually side three Zombira if I can. I didn't side in three Zombira in my worlds just because I was expecting a little bit less warrior and more some of the other things and like some more little extra things. So I made room for a cliff in my side. But I normally like three Zombira just because it's really, really, really good in the mirror against basically everything. It forces your opponent, even if they're playing spies. The fact that you can get rid of one puts a lot of pressure on your opponent to decide if they want to tribute their only other spy, which is a defensive wall, for a Mobius that might get solemned, might get no value, might
Yeah.
die right after. And then on top of that, it's just a really good turn one summon. It blocks you from taking damage from having to use any back row on an 1800 monster. It walls. It's basically snatch proof. Unless they're using a snatch on it to put their own Mobius down, it doesn't do it. Like snatch doesn't do anything against it. And in a warrior mirror, sometimes you can get caught by a snatch, so that's really good. I will say I'm not the biggest spy Mobius person myself because I think that combo is really powerful in the mirror, but I also think that it also leads to a lot of breaks where you either don't see any spies and then you're stuck with Mobius in your hand, or you're just not putting any pressure on your opponent, just sitting with these things, and they clear them and then start applying pressure because you have to make room for three spy Mobius, right? So
Yeah.
you have to take out sometimes some of your aggro monsters to do that. So it's not. I've done it before. Not my personal favorite. I like to do Zumbira, Zing, and Smashing. Those are like
Hmm.
three common cards I'll always have in my side deck, or there'll always be one of. Zing, I love Zing. That card is just so good in the mirror. It's one of the only cards that lets you just get free value or force your opponent to do something wild like Solomon or something. Um, and then
Oh,
Smashing just gets rid of everything.
that's true. Also, Zing, like, it's more the threat of Zing than the card itself.
Oh,
Like you mentioned, once they see it game one, games two and three, they're going to completely change the way they play.
oh
Based off of that
yeah.
knowledge.
I've seen it so many times, especially when you get, in these really high level matches at the end of tournaments where your opponents, watched your replays, they've watched your previous games, they've seen Zing, they don't want to get caught by the Zing, so they'll just set one, set one, set one, and then what up happening is because I usually pair three Zing, or sorry, one Zing with three Dust Tornado. Sometimes I won't even side in the Zing. I'll just have the three Dust Tornado because you
Yeah.
can always have value of trading on their back row because they're so scared of getting zinged that they'll just set one, and if they're setting one and you're just dust turning it, it gives you so much free like rain to just attack. So I will agree with you 100%. I think Zing's primary skill is it being mind game.
Yeah, definitely. And going back real quick to Zombira, one thing I'll just add is if you're newer to playing Warriors and Goat format, Zombira is it's typically you see it and newer players will summon it and attack with it, but a lot of times, like Moxies mentioned, it's a defensive wall. Like people say, it's basically an attack position spy. So you don't always have to attack with it, and in a lot of instances, you will sit on it and use it as a protective wall.
And it's just a good dark too for BLS, or some people recently have been siding an extra Sork for not so much the mirror but for like other matchups, and it's just a really powerful dark, and especially since in the mirror sometimes you want to get rid of some of your 1800 or lower monsters, and the prime targets that people cut in the mirror or side out is Don Zalug. Maybe you're going to side out one of your Kaikus.
Yep.
You usually don't side out your ninja grandmaster because there's potential of spy, so you have to cut a different 1800 monster, and because you're cutting so many darks, it's good to replace them with more darks. So Zambara just fills a lot of niche. I will say I have added one card to my side. Recently, I've been liking Goblin Attack Force. It being
Interesting.
searchable and 2300 is just pretty good. It's nice because not so much in the Warrior Mirror, but in other matchups, people will just summon his Umbira against Warriors and kind of pass, like use that as like a wall. And Gaff kind of gets around that. Pretty powerful. Zero
Plus,
zero defense, whatever. It's he's there just to get a value
yeah,
trade.
and sometimes too, like you run so many, battle traps and stuff in Warriors anyway, and ways that you can protect it if you want to or need to, you can always protect it for a turn or two until you can put it back into offense. But you're correct. It's just there to make that nice efficient trade most of the time. So this isn't really pertaining to the Warrior Mirror, but since you're here, I have to ask. I'm curious, we've seen a lot of different varieties of warriors, become popular lately. We've seen, obviously the flip warrior that a lot of people have seen success with, and of course the more kind of face-up version of warriors that we've seen you play, the kind of knockless game one version, and even usually games two and three. I noticed in your worlds list specifically, you only ran one faith, so there's really not a ton even that comes in games two that could potentially be knocked. What do you? Why do you kind of lead towards the kind of more face up version of it, the version that you played at Worlds specifically?
Well, at Worlds I did that because pre top 32 people weren't really knowing your decks, and in the Swiss portion, and the beforehand before this tournament, my last couple lists that I got second place in the FLC with, and that second place in the GGP was, I was playing a bit more flips or set cards. Like I had Spirit Reaper, I had double Moths. So people were kind of noticing that I liked bringing in, like it was pretty common that if I was going first, I would bring in double Moths and Spear Reaper and stuff like that. So I was having people bring in Nox and Minecons versus me. So I didn't really want that. And I was having issues where double Moth when it works, it's incredible. You get so much value. It can just free win a game. But what ends up happening is you just don't have enough spell counters that are like playable. You have enough spells. You just don't have enough spells that are easily playable.
Hmm.
So you just have all these faiths in your hand that are just doing nothing. Like when I played my FLC finals versus Ivan Rizito, I had double faith in hand, no spells, and I just got ran through in 2 seconds. So I decided I didn't really want to do that. I'd still like the one faith. I think the way that Labounty had that, like all season last year, where he just did the one faith, and it kind of just comes up mid game, end game, and by then it can just turn into like a game ender.
Yeah.
It just gets you what you need to finish the game. So I decided just to do that and just rely on either my opponent not knowing what I'm doing and side decking, these Nox and Storm and Minecons versus me, or keeping them in, or just beating them straight up with attack.
Yeah, I think the main takeaway from that is just, keeping people on their toes. If you do really well at a tournament playing one list, it's usually good to maybe consider some different options for the next one to, keep people on their toes. Like you mentioned, really
Yep.
good high level warrior players are going to, have an idea of what your tendencies are, what you like to side, and yeah, keeping people on their toes is always a good thing.
Yep.
Is there anything else you want to add? Any other additional tips or tricks for the mirror?
I do think people should, if they don't, they should have smashing ground on their side. I think it's pretty clear cut these days that at least one smashing ground should be in every warrior side. Labounty a couple years ago got third place with smashing grounds in his main deck even. Um, that card lets you cheese not knowing player tendencies also, because what ends up happening is that sometimes you can get caught with like a Connect Soldier. Like I've seen someone just run into a Connect Soldier and they have no answer to it. Usumbira is not even an answer to it, and that's a very popular side deck card. Smashing Ground just lets you clear threats that you can't deal with. Mobius, BLS, spies, Connect Soldiers. If you can use it for other matchups, against Jinzos and Thousand Eyes Restricts and Reasoning Gate cards that are too powerful for you to stop, just stuff like that. I think people should have that card in their side deck.
I agree. I think too. What are the typical side cards that people bring in against warriors? Well, they bring in spies, they bring in Spirit Reapers, Zombiras, smashing deals with all of those. So yeah, that's a great point. All right, so now we're going to look at a replay, a Warrior Mirror from the World Championship. Just recently, Moxies getting top 32 at this event. You finished first after Swiss, right?
I did, yes.
So you ran into this. Is this in top 32 or is this in?
This is round 6 of Swiss. I was 5-0 at the time. This is round 6.
Gotcha. Interesting. I mean, as we know, Dueling High, who typically known for playing a lot of Chaos Turbo, switched over to Warriors recently and has been doing pretty damn good with it. So
He won a patron right before this with it. He was currently at this match right here. He was also 5-0.
Damn. Yeah. All right. Pretty good hand to start off. I'm curious to see what you do. So yeah.
So he knows my deck. I know his deck. Because of that, and I have BLS in hand. I don't mind putting a 1600 Blade Knight out. I'm not the biggest fan of putting Blade Knights at 1600, just because it forces you to have to use back row to protect a monster that normally you don't have to protect like that. But because I've Trap Dust Shoot, my plan here is I'm just going to Trap Dust Shoot any monster that I don't like, because his monster count, he probably only has one monster in his hand or two.
Yep.
I mean, if it's two, I do have the Sakuuchi armor if he's got a bigger one. So I just want to put monsters down so that I can put my breaker down the next turn and just start going, go.
And you immediately get light and dark and grave really quickly doing it that way.
So I want to use my summons this way.
That makes a lot of sense. Set 4. All right. So we Dust Shoot. Interesting choice here. Yeah.
I didn't actually like seeing this hand, just because there's 3 monsters, which isn't great. This actually took me a decent amount of time to decide what to do, because there's a lot of options here. My first instinct was to get rid of DD Warrior Lady, because I don't want the innate potential that he can banish one of my light and darks and put me in a bad spot. But the problem is, if I get rid of DD Warrior Lady, now he's got a Kaiku that he can summon. I'm forced to either let my Blade Knight die or Saku it, and then he's got a Blade Knight on his turn that's bigger than my cards.
True, and then you don't have the Saku anymore.
Yeah, so I decided that I'm going to get rid of the Blade Knight, and that I don't think he's going to set DD Warrior Lady or put it into attack mode and not attack. I decided that it's more likely that he's going to. This is where like forward thinking comes into play. I
Definitely.
saw the turns be he's going to summon Kaiku and try and get value. I'm going to Saku it. I'm going to summon Breaker, pop on his back rows, attack into it. He's going to block with either Mirror Force Saku, and then he's going to try and attack me with DD Warrior Lady, blah, blah, blah. We're going to go back and forth. That's how I assumed it would go.
Definitely. Yeah.
So I decided to just get rid of the Blade Knight.
That makes a lot of sense. See, that's one thing I would have never considered, DD Warrior Lady, knowing that that could potentially cause an issue with your lights and darks. That's something I would have missed and gotten one of my monsters banished, and the next thing you know, your BLS does nothing. So let's see. He decides to go with the Kaiku.
I have to do this because I don't want Kaiku to ruin any of my potential. Now, personally, there is a small mistake here. I'm gonna go Breaker here, which is fine because I know his back row are Solemn, Mirror
Either
Force,
has
that.
to Solemn or U plus. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a jog set. There's no reason for me not to just jog first and see what I get because I could get Storm.
That's true.
So I should have definitely jogged, and I'm gonna jog after. But it was definitely a mistake. I should have just jogged first.
Solemn's a good pickup there for sure.
That's good. So now this is what I decide. Well, one, I didn't hit the Mirror Force, so I don't want to just give him free value.
Yep.
Two, now that my Blade Knight's in defense, there's a chance now that he thinks to himself that he can get rid of the Breaker with Saku, that he can now summon Lady and attack over my Blade Knight. And I want him to do that at this point, right? Because I want to be able to have my BLS. And I don't want him to banish. I want him to think that he's getting a plus, right? So I'm hoping that he just uses the Saku on Breaker because he wants to protect the lady, right? Which is so I'm going to turn my Blade Knight to defense to force him to Saku the Breaker and to summon the lady next turn.
Damn, that's good. All right.
Which he does.
Yes.
And then I'm going to set I think I have 2 Solemn set now.
Yep.
Which is another
great
bonus,
spot
right?
to be in, yeah.
Exactly. So I want him to summon Lady here, which he does.
Yep.
And then he's going to attack, I'm pretty sure, which he does, which is again what I want.
See, right here, this is another spot where newer players might be tempted to just instantly Solemn this, but there's no need.
No need at all. You want to just protect. Now, here's an interesting play right here, because you might think I have Blacklisted Soldiers live. I could just summon him, banish, get a free banish on the lady, and then attack with one of the other cards, right? I decide, because I don't want to walk into a TT and have to Solemn it. I have 2 Solemn set, right? So I want to get rid of as many cards he has right now without using a Solemn. So I'm going to not summon my Blacklisted Soldier. I'm just going to summon the Kaiku, and I want to force a Mirror Force. I want him to think that I don't have any protection, because he just attacked both my back row, and I didn't protect my Blade Knight, so maybe he thinks that if he can Mirror Force my monster, that he can just keep pushing. So I want him to Mirror Force right now, so I don't have to Mirror Force, or I don't have to Solemn the Mirror Force later, right, with the BLS.
Interesting.
Which is he ends up doing, right, because he's going to think that he can push for advantage now, or he'll just do this. He'll just banish both, which is fine by me. I'm okay with that, because now he's got no light and dark for himself.
And like we mentioned, Kaiku is not always doing a ton in the mirror. It can be good, but if he top decks a Rhoda or another Blade Knight or something, then the Kaiku could get attacked over if you let it. So interesting, yeah. All right, so he sets another, passes back to you, dead duo. And,
but I'm still not going to summon the BLS here.
You know that you can force out some battle traps eventually. Do you ever mill?
No. I don't mill. You could mill, but
typically, you don't want to mill unless they already have light and dark in the grave. Is kind of the only instance where you might want to. But even then, it's not amazing. But
so now I'm gonna set this duo just because there's an extremely high chance that he's got a Dust Tornado, which is what you alluded to earlier. You want to try and get value from some of these dead cards.
So yeah, that's exactly what you want right there. Yeah, you definitely are feeling pretty good right here in this position for sure. Goes Rhoda.
Which is fine. I think he's just going to get Blade Knight probably, right?
Yeah. One thing I'll also mention, some people don't always know this, if you really need, like obviously in this situation, there's no need to Solemn, but if you're in a situation where you need to Solemn, you definitely want to Solemn the Rhoda rather than the monster itself, because sometimes, if they can get exiled or something, they're going to be able to get it back with Call or Prima. So if you're in a situation where you have to, solemn whatever is going to come off of this Rhoda, always solemn the Rhoda rather than the monster itself.
He's gonna summon. I'm just gonna not solemn it because 1400 is just too hard to protect. It's gonna die sooner or later, and I just want to keep my back row for before that. So now here's the thing. So I could summon the BLS, banish the Blade Knight, and then leave it at that or premature and try and push for advantage. But I have double solemn, so like I said, I'm trying to get rid of cards without using my solemns. So I've decided that I'm going to just summon the BLS. I'm not going to banish because I have premature in my hand. I want to just premature my BLS again. So I'm going to summon my BLS, attack, force out the Mirror Force, which is what I want to get rid of, and let him Mirror Force me. I'm not going to solemn it.
Wow, that is crazy to me. If I ever have double solemn in a situation like this, I feel like I have a lot of leeway and I don't feel bad about just ripping one of them right here, but you're getting max value out of all of this, being as efficient as possible. It's good stuff.
I want to use my Psalms for his new cards, not his
Definitely.
cards that are already there.
Definitely.
So now I'm going to premature burial it and then banish. So now I have two Psalms.
Yeah,
He's got one
nasty.
card set and he's summoning one. So now I can Psalm any answer. No matter what, I can Psalm something.
Yeah, that's nasty. You get another monster as well.
Which he still has TT. I don't want to use a Psalm. Like I said, I'm trying to just use only what I need to, so I'm just going to do that. You could just Psalm and attack because there's no Mirror Force. That's a fine play too. And now I've got Ring, so now I know I'm in basically a really good spot. So he's going to do that. I'm not going to Psalm that either.
Interesting.
Okay. Yeah, because now I have Ring and Ninjas' Grandmaster with 6,600 or with 3,300.
It can get kind of awkward sometimes drawing Ring in combination with having Solemns, but I'm sure you'll navigate it. Main phase 2, normal.
So you Solemn is this. This was a little awkward because
for sure.
I could Solemn and Solemn this, and then Solemn whatever new card he has, but then that makes my Ring dead. Because now I'm going to go down to 1,800, and now my Ring on my own card just loses. So I decided I'm just going to let him do it, set my Ring for any monster he draws, and then Solemn anything else.
Makes sense.
Which ends up happening. So and this is okay. So I didn't preemptively did this. I did this on purpose because I want it to be on 1,600 just in case I have to Solemn something.
That makes sense.
Go to 18, I still win.
That's true. Yeah.
And then I'm just going to Solemn the Torrential.
Makes sense. Nice. Really well played. All right, so game 2. There is the Goblin Attack Force that you mentioned earlier. Decent hand.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's quite good. So he's set 2, which, as far as I know, he's not a Zing player. I don't remember seeing too many Zing from him. So setting 2 like that is kind of weird. So I would assume that this is where things in my mind could be a Storm, like a Storm pro set Storm play that he's trying to pull off with like a Battle Trap Protector.
Definitely.
Could be a Solemn and a Battle Trap. Like I'm thinking somewhere along the lines of Solemn plus Storm, Solemn plus something, or Storm plus Back Row Protector.
That's really good to think about. I think usually like I default when I see 2 face downs to thinking, all right, one's a chainable and then one's probably like a real trap, like a Saku or something. But thinking preemptively about the potential for a pro heavy is really smart. And because I walk into those way too often. So you go ahead and decide to graceful. Any thoughts on holding this at all, or you pretty much just want to give yourself the best
I just want to draw into, because he's given me an opportunity to, especially since I don't think he plays Jog either. I'm pretty sure from watching his matches. So this is just a free opportunity to get a potential blowout Storm card or whatever. So I just want to just draw.
Makes sense.
So
a lot to think about here.
Yeah, there is a lot to think about. I decide that because I have Rhoda and Goblin Attack Force, I don't need the Zombira right now. So I'm going to get rid of that. And then I decide to get rid of the Smashing Ground too, because Snatch Shield is just better than that. And you have a bunch of Dust Tornadoes to protect the Snatch Shield monster with. So I just decide I'm going to just Goblin Attack Force push, have Rhoda for backup, and Snatch Shield bunch of the like, extra Death Tornadoes, so I'm just
Makes
gonna attack
sense.
with the Goblin Type Force. Maybe he'll just Saku it or something, so he rings it.
Okay. So it definitely makes you wonder what this second set should be.
Yeah, so I'm thinking Dust Tornado, Solemn, or Storm. Um, so I'm not going to set double Dust Tornadoes because I don't want to get blown out here. And I can always just Dust Tornado and face set another Dust Tornado.
Yep.
So I don't want to give him any opportunity to blow me out with a Solar Storm, so I'm not going to set
Makes sense.
max set cards. So he just sets and passes, which is really weird. So at this point, I'm thinking to myself that he's got BLS in hand, Snatch in hand, Mobius in hand, cards like that are all in his hand right
Yeah,
now. Is what
because
I'm thinking to myself.
typically, yeah, not many sets in a situation like this or not summoning anything would, I don't know. But at the same time, not setting a ton, so you allude that he might be monster clogged, but he's not summoning anything. So yeah, that makes sense. Maybe BLS, Mobius, something like that could be set potentially. Hit the Saku, and
then
go
I
ahead
set
and
my
set the dust
Tornado.
yourself. Okay.
Now, because I have a jog beside it, I don't really care
Yeah.
what the other card is. So I'm still a little worried about something random here. So I think I do Dust Tornado this just because I want to make sure it's cleared.
He's
Yeah,
a
so
solemn. Hmm.
it's a Solemn, and then I'm gonna jog here,
Yep.
get a Mobius, which isn't great.
Do you agree? You have the graceful smashing, so
I decide I'm not gonna just push for damage, even though his hand is a little not doing anything. But I do think there's a chance that he has Snatch in his hand. So I'm just going to set and try and get a graceful to try and draw into some more
sure.
protection or cards. I'd rather just do that. I don't think if he had Rhoda, he would have used it. So he would need to either top deck Rhoda, top deck Blade Knight to kill this card.
That makes sense. Yeah. And he has the Mind Con.
Yeah,
Very
this I wasn't
interesting.
expecting.
Wow.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting the Mind Con. I didn't think people would side that versus me because I haven't really shown too much of the flip stuff. Luckily for me, he didn't have any value from this Minecon. It sucked for me because I'm not going to get a graceful out
Of
of it
course
now.
not. Yeah, but he just has to get back at the Mind Con again, which is
yeah,
do
the
nothing.
Minecon exactly. So that's fine. And like I said, now he can't kill my Moths. Now I've got Mobius fodder.
Yeah, it's true. It's a good point. Interesting. Yeah, I that's very high risk reward with that siding into that.
Yeah, I don't think that was that was good. So I'm just gonna push for damage.
Yeah.
He's not really doing anything, so I'm just gonna go for it and just try and push for damage.
Yeah, his hand definitely seems kind of weak from how
Slow.
it's been played out so far.
I think
yeah.
he's got Mobius, BLS in hand. Could be Snatch. Snatch. I have Rhoda and Asaku, and in my own Snatch deal. So I decided I'm okay
Yep.
with him having Snatch deal. I wasn't expecting the Storm. I think he top decked it or something like that.
I would
That
assume
was my
so. He
thought
probably would have
because,
used it earlier.
the way he was playing his cards, it didn't make sense to me that he already had Storm in hand. Gets Rhoda, so I assumed. Well, once I saw Dawn, I was like, okay, so he does have Snatch because you're only going to do that if you have Snatch.
Yeah. Obviously, you prefer he hits the Rhoda right.
The
off
Rhoda,
of this.
yes. And now things are looking pretty bad here. Not gonna lie.
Oh, definitely.
This is a great top deck.
Fantastic
Unfortunately,
draw,
I make and people are gonna make mistakes. I make a huge error here, which is really unfortunate. I was overthinking about trying to get a battle phase type of like MST type of thing, so I decided to snatch steal my own Mobius. It's already snatch steal. When really, what I should have done is just MST'd my snatch steal or his snatch steal, and then if he had an answer to it, I can just snatch steal it again anyway. So this is a huge mistake. He's snatch stealing my own monster when I have MST in my hand, and on top of it, this is already an error, and then I'm going to make another error on top of that because I'm overthinking it, and I'm going to MST the snatch for no reason. Like it's just pointless, absolutely pointless. Huge L. Luckily for me, the chances of that set card being the Minecon are pretty high.
For sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, everybody makes mistakes, even the best do it. It's one of the things I try to promote on this channel. I feel like people act like they're perfect online and act like they never make mistakes, but everybody does. Even the highest level players do, and it's how you learn from them. It's how you improve.
And
so
I even say in chat, I made a mistake there.
Yep.
So I already know that his hand is Mobius or BLS in hand, and his set card is Minecon because from paying attention to all of his previous turns, he's always kept just this like certain cards in hand. So to me, he's got Mobius or BLS in hand right now that he's stuck with, which means because he already added the Minecon with Faith, that set card is mind control. So I'm not worried about that set card. I think he's got a dead BLS in hand, or now he shouldn't have a dead BLS, right? He's got Blade Knight. Can you look his graveyard for a sec?
Yeah.
I can't remember now. No, so he's just got the Dark. So now he's got a dead BLS, a dead Mobius, or one of those two, and a dead Mind Control set. So now
Yep.
I'm just feeling confident I can just push damage and hopefully just
Definitely.
win.
And see, that's we talk about what separates good from great players is being actively cognizant of what your opponent could have. Sometimes, especially when you get into card games or Yu-Gi-Oh or whatever, a lot of times you just focus on the cards that are in front of you. And as you get better and better, just slowly, starting to think more about what your opponent could actually have will really help up your game a little bit. I'm not quite here yet. I don't think about all those things. I think about, hey, he could maybe have a Mobius or something, but it's just a fleeting thought. But you gotta really pay attention to your opponent's
All the
patterns
turns.
and what they've been doing again and again and again. And it's a game of deduction, really. Yeah.
So I'm confident. Like even though my life points are low, and if this is a battle trap, I'm actually not in a good spot. I'm so confident that that card is mind control that I'm just going to be pushing.
Yep.
Especially since I'm almost ready to just win. So I'm gonna jar. I do have BLS live, so I'm not scared of Trenchal. So I'm just going to just summon it, banish, and attack.
Hard
and
read on the mind concept. Very good, because typically some people in this situation would still fear this back row because we haven't seen Torrential, we haven't seen Mirror Force, so you might have that in the back of your mind, but you have a hard read. This is the mind con, and it indeed is. And
appreciate.
That'll
and
do
see,
it.
now if you hit show both, yeah. See, so if you hit show both, he's got the mind con set. The Minecon set, and he had the Mobius and the BLS, and I'm sure if you just refresh this game right to the beginning, like you should actually do that. Can you refresh just this game too?
Yeah.
Just so people can see, because
good.
this is how deduction and seeing patterns work. Now you're gonna see in his opening hand that there's an extremely high chance that he has either the BLS or the Mobius was in his opening hand. Yeah, so there's the Mobius. So things like that, right? You want to be aware of why are they not summoning cards? Like how come it's been 2 or 3 turns of them summoning? How come they've set their trap cards in this pattern? Blah 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 blah, stuff like that. Just so that when you're 6 turns later and they have that same card that's just been doing that hasn't been summoned or hasn't been set. That you can just deduct. Yep, that's got to be a BLS or Mobius in hand.
That information goes a really long way.
It was a good game.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he's a great duelist. So shout out to Dueling High as well. Anything you'd like to add, Moxies?
Anyone who doesn't, who's just watching this video because it's a good quality video, play Go format, play retro format. Come out, join all the servers, get in there. Lots of people. There's lots of high-level players in with any of the types of decks that you might enjoy that are willing to just share knowledge. This format, specifically Go format, is quite nice that all the top players are very. It could be a mix of ego that they just like sharing things to make themselves look better, but regardless, they're very information giving. They like to tell people what they could or should be doing or how they should be, thinking about the game and stuff like that. So there's a lot of ways to get better in this, and the top players are very helpful for that. And it's just fun to play.
Yeah, it's great stuff. Well, thank you so much, Moxies. Genuinely, I know you didn't have to do this. You come by and drop a bunch of knowledge. And I think it's really cool. I really appreciate it. I think stuff like this goes a long way in the community. High-level players sharing their expertise. I think it goes a long way and really helps build the community. So really, genuinely, thank you for your time, man.
No problem. Thank you for having me. This channel's awesome, and I'd love to see it grow.
Thank you. All right, well, thanks everybody for watching. I really appreciate it. Until the next one. Bye.